Hey everyone, and welcome to the Perfect Bite podcast, your fusion of food and entrepreneurship. You'll hear stories from chefs, restaurateurs, CPG brands, and more from the food and bev industry. All of them are at different points in their journeys, talking about their experiences and how they've cooked up something new. Let's dig in. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Perfect Bite podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Perkins. Today, I'm talking with one of the hardest working entrepreneurs you'll ever meet. And no, he's not building the next tech unicorn. He's nourishing people around the world with his nutrient-rich bites from the chef's garden and his infectious personality. Please welcome Farmer Lee Jones.
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh my gosh. Hi, Farmer Lee. Look at you with all of your beautiful produce.
Well, we're at the farm market, and we opened the farm market in the middle of COVID to make clean food available to the community. And that was important for the community and for us. So we've went in full force with the farm market, and we're open all winter long because we have great team members. And of course, we have great customers, and you don't stop eating when the season seems to be at an end. The reality is there's lots of great veggies all winter long.
Oh, I can't wait for us to talk more about that today, especially how you grow them, because it is so different than how anyone would think. And you and I are talking in the middle of February. We're both in Ohio. I was so happy that when I made the move from Chicago to Columbus, that I was then only 2 hours away from the chef's garden, and we got to meet in person this last fall. So it's definitely a very, very special place. So let's take it back here a little bit, back to childhood. You are from Huron, Ohio, originally as well. Tell us about when you first fell in love with food and what were some of those favorite bites when you were a kid?
Yeah, in the wintertime, we would do odd things to try and generate revenue. I can remember my dad going to auctions and buying a tractor that maybe needed some TLC, and we would bring those home. And on Saturdays, of course, when we're not in school, would be a day that we would spend in the shop trying to have enough heat to stay warm, take a tractor apart and rebuild it. And then we would paint them and then sell them and try and generate some revenue from that. But one of the best parts of Saturday was we would go up to Huron, and there was a place called Andy's and Willie's. It was just a family-owned restaurant, but our go-to was perch, French fries, and coleslaw. And I think part of it was I would have done anything to have gotten to spend time with my dad. But the first bites that I remember that were amazing were Lake Erie perch and potatoes skin on. They would fry those. They were like I don't know, I think they call them a JoJo and coleslaw. And that was one of the most amazing meals that we had. And I look back and with much fondness to that time.
Yes, that is such a quintessential Midwestern meal that you just described. That reminds me of
Absolutely.
the summers. Yeah. Summers, I'd go up to Door County, Wisconsin, and you'd have some whitefish from the fish boil and just good old, fish or meat and potatoes.
But, I think that it epitomizes the fact that food is associated with memory. Yes. And that, in many cases, is what makes food special, because it can transpire or take us back to a place or a time in our lives that was a special time. And to be reminded of that through the flavor of the food is really something that's pretty special.
It is. It also reaches across the aisle in terms of culture and language, and just, it's something we all need and something we all love.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us about, you grew up in a farming family. And so it's in your blood. Your dad was the original Farmer Jones. What would you say made you into the farmer you are today, and how you fell in love with vegetables and other produce?
Well, and I want to qualify the whole conversation with, I have done nothing on my own. It's a family business, and we have an amazing team. My brother and I are business partners at this point. It was my brother and my father and I, and Dad was certainly an inspiration. He went to work for a vegetable grower at 14 years old. And the farm that we're on here is the farm that my dad started at 14 years old on. And maybe some of the listeners don't even think about this, but it hasn't been that far in our past that roads and refrigeration had not developed to the point where you could move product across the country so freely. Into the 40s, roads and refrigeration had not developed to the point where there was a lot of outside competition. And the thing that's amazing, the very thing that we're trying to strive for today, which is regional distribution, is what we had right in our grasp in America. And we allowed that to slip away. And it became about the convenience and the efficiency of shipping products from Mexico, from Florida, from Arizona, from the Carolinas, any place where it could be grown. And so we can eat a raspberry 12 months a year. We can eat asparagus 12 months a year. And now here we are back to trying to go back to that. My dad started for a fella that recognized that that outside competition was coming. There were over 330 vegetable growers in this county. As far as we can figure, it was the largest concentration of vegetable growers of any county in the world. Now you can say, wait a minute, you can go to counties in California where it's 100% agriculture. From the north to the south, to the east to the west, it's 100% agriculture. But it's also owned by 100 farms that have 10 to 30,000 acres. These are what we would call truck farmers, small family farms that grew at the large side 100 acres. And they would grow their vegetables, they would pick them, they would bring them in and pack them. And the farmers markets were entirely different than what you and I think of today. You can think of all the family-owned grocery stores that used to exist in America. As the roads and refrigeration got better, then the outside competition came for those grocery stores. And one by one, those family-owned grocery stores went away. The competition came for the small family farms, and they couldn't compete because they needed larger volumes, more tons. Ultimately, my dad and mom bought that farm from Mr. Nichols. And by the time my mom and dad took it over in the late 60s, early 70s, the 65 growers had diminished down to 12 or 15. Mm. And so my dad continued to increase his acreage and was farming about 12 to 1,500 acres of fresh market vegetables when I was 15 or 16. And we were shipping semi-loads of produce every place east of the Mississippi River. But to give you an idea of how bad the economy got turned upside down in the late 70s and early 80s, interest rates at 22%. And traditional with what farmers would do would be to borrow operating capital in the winter to buy things like the containers and the seeds and the fertilizer and all of the things that you needed to farm for that year. You invested them in the crops for that spring. As the crops came back, you repaid those loans. Hopefully you had something left and you reinvested it back in the farm. My dad had some pretty good years. He reinvested every single penny back into the farm. He was selling to these chain grocery stores that were paying him in 180 days with no interest. So basically you're bankrolling these large stores with no interest. That's a lesson in failure in itself. And then kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will, we had a hailstorm. And it was a hailstorm that wiped out all of the crops. We continued to farm the rest of that year, but we knew it was over. So what started us into the food business or into the specialty food business, I think, which is finally winding back to your initial question. I know this was a long story to get to what seemed like a simple question, but my single word for that would be desperation. We were desperate to find a way to survive in agriculture in 1983. Were you even born then, Sarah? Were you born in 1983?
Don't call me out, please. No, I was not. I was still a twinkle in my parents' eye after my brother.
I really feel old now.
Don't. The energy and the spirit of someone that people my age and younger, they just don't. And I loved your answer, and I'll let you get back to your wonderful story here in a second too, because in 2025 and the last few years as well, and during my lifetime, I mean, we have seen terrible recessions. We have seen terrible interest rates in these moments. There are hard cycles in life where your entire livelihood is threatened by Mother Nature.
Well, my dad always said, it's not if bad things will happen, they will come. It is most assured that hailstorms will come, that floods will come, that droughts will come, that economic hard times will come. And it's preparing for those. Farms put in what they call tiling below the earth's surface and below the plow point. And what that does, people may have seen it before and not even known. They used to use clay tile. They were 1 foot long and you could get them 2 inches or 6 inches or even bigger, and you put them below and you put them butt to butt, if you will. And you start at the high point in the field and you go towards a creek, and it's always going a little bit lower. So the water can come down through, it goes into the tile and it drains it off. And there was an old saying that you paid for tiling whether you put it in or not. And what that meant was either you were going to invest in it or at some point you were going to pay for it. You could go 9 years and be perfectly fine. And the 10th year, the flood would put you out of business.
Yeah.
You try and think about what will happen and try and be prepared for that. Creating diversity. Don't put all the eggs in one basket.
Yeah. And I think those are great life lessons and business lessons for anyone, whether it's farming or whether it is for, say, someone who is working on, say, a tech product or anything. You have to be prepared that things are going to happen. And a lot of things are outside of your control too. And it's all about how you handle them. And like you said, too, spreading things across the board so that you're not, saying, well, everything rests on this one single thing.
Right.
So the Chef's Garden itself, as what it is today, began after that 80s period. You met an incredible chef at a farmer's market. She told you, you need to be growing for chefs. You need to be growing for flavor. And before it was just thought of, and a lot of farms still operate this way today, of grow for the yield, get what you can out there and get as much as you can off of it. And you in particular, you're one of, is it 3 farms in the United States that's doing regenerative farming?
Well, I don't know how many. I think that it's really a good program. There certainly are more farms doing regenerative agriculture, and it's a movement that is gaining steam. If listeners get a chance to find a documentary called Kiss the Ground, Gabe Brown is actually speaking all over the country, and he kind of followed the same path. I mean, he was broke on his farm, but somehow managed to survive, and he started making those changes and getting rid of the chemicals and farming more regeneratively. We lost the farm. We started back at farmers markets, which ironically were at a historic low. My mom's generation didn't want to go to a farm market. They saw my grandmother's generation work way too hard, put way too many hours in the kitchen and doing household chores. Was it gender specific at that time? Yeah, it probably was. But back then, mom saw grandma spend a lot of time in taking care of feeding the family.
Yeah.
And they said, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to waste time going to the farm market. I'm going to buy convenience because I'm working. So consequently, you have a situation where that generation didn't want to go to farmers markets. Farmers markets were at a historic low, but we were desperate to be able to somehow put vegetables in the ground and take them to market and sell. And that's where we met Iris Balin, who had trained in Europe. And she said, just like you said, grow for the flavor, not the tons per acre. Flavor was so critical, but do it without chemical. And I believe that there would be enough chefs that would support you. And you got to understand, we were so desperate for a way to be able to survive in agriculture that this looked like a little glimmer of hope. And we grabbed around both of her ankles and said, teach us. And she introduced us to a chef, and then another chef, and then another chef. And that's really kind of the beginning of the Chef's Garden. What's ironic is that there are more farmers markets today than in the history of the United States. So we've lived long enough to see the thing go full circle. And we're just elated to see the largest number of farmers markets in the history of the United States. It's wonderful. People are getting it. They're understanding that there's a connection between our gut health, between our health, where the food's coming from, who they're supporting. You vote with your dollars. Find the farmers markets in your area and support them. Talk to the farmers. The farmers are not at fault for the place that we're in. The farmers are just stuck in the model that says produce as efficiently and cheaply as possible and as many tons per acre to keep your expenses down, and you might stay in business. So I don't fault them at all. They were trapped. They still are trapped in that model. And you got to follow the money again. Pharmaceutical companies, chemical companies, they give grants to the universities because somehow the universities are always financially strapped. And they say, look, we'd like to give you a grant for $10 million to be able to help the farmers. And by the way, the research that you do, to help the farmers needs to include our chemicals. So I can remember on my dad's farm, and it never felt right to my dad. You got a disease on a cabbage, you got an insect infestation, you send a sample to the university, and they send you back recommendations. Here's the chemical to get rid of it. Here's the chemical to kill the insect. It's very much like our Western culture of medicine. Same exact system. It's a money mill. And so you get amoxicillin, a penicillin, a viacillin. You go in for a strep throat. You get it cleared up. A year later, it comes back. The doctor doesn't say, now, Sarah, look, this is the third time in 3 years that you've been back with this strep. Let's see what's out of balance in your body and see if we can't find the proper balance so that your immune system can fight that off. Well, the same theory happens in plants. And that's really a part of regenerative agriculture. Healthy soil, healthy vegetables, healthy people, healthy environment. That's the crux of what we're trying to do. And it's really exciting to see the result of that. We actually have a lab set up right here on the farm where we're testing the results of what we're doing. We've read studies where every single day that a vegetable's harvested, it loses 10% of its nutritional value. In many cases, the stuff that's going through a traditional distribution system where it's coming in from wherever, and then it goes to a warehouse, and then it goes back out to a grocery store. In many cases, the product is at its best 10 days to 2 weeks old. Not much left there. We're eating roughage in a lot of cases. I think it's how the food is grown, but I think it's how that soil is being taken care of, which is really critical. We believe all health starts with the health of the soil.
Yes. And there are a lot of studies these days, a lot of folks talking about how the gut is being recognized as the second brain, how it affects our health in so many ways. You know, when you eat healthy and you have your stomach feeling in a good place, you do notice that you have better energy to do things and you're in a better mood. So one of the reasons that you and I have connected is half of my family is on farms in central Illinois, more for commercial corn and soybeans and things along those lines. And I fell in love with a man who also came from a farming family. And they actually talk about farming a lot more than my family has as a family. So there have been presentations sometimes at Christmas about biochemistry of the soil and how it is affecting crops and the yield that is supporting the family and how it's going to be working going forward. A couple of questions based off of that. Talk to us about the difference between regenerative farming and organic, because, you know, everyone says, well, you have to buy organic, but what's really happening with organic?
Well, I can't be an expert on organic because we are not organic. We've never claimed to be organic. Our goal has never been to be organic. I believe that the true hardcore organic people believe that organic today is bastardized because they allow some of the same chemicals that you can use in monoculture can be used in that. In general, the assumption is that organic is healthier for you. From the aspect of less chemical, I would say yes. But in regenerative agriculture, and what we're trying to do is not only do we want it to be chemical free, but we want it to be nutritionally viable. And you can be organic and still not have the nutritional level that we seek. So that's really, really critical to us to try and get that balance in reduction or elimination completely of chemical and nutritionally viable.
And in your case too, instead of using chemicals, you're focusing a lot on using cover crops, right?
We are, and that really kind of ties back to healthy soil, healthy vegetables, healthy people, healthy environment. We all as adults have perhaps heard or even said now, maybe even tongue in cheek, but I need vitamin D. I'm going to go get some sunshine. Right? But if you can get your mind around the idea that your body can be a receptacle for energy from the sun, then it's not such a far bridge to recognize that different types of plants can harvest different types of energy from the sun. So for us, it's just the same minerals that are in our body are the same minerals that are in the soil. If they're out of balance in the soil, and then we're eating the vegetables grown in those soils that are out of balance, guess what? Our bodies are out of balance. And consequently, we have a 3,000% increase in kidney, liver, heart, cancer disease, attention deficit disorder, autism, childhood obesity, allergies, and diabetes. There's a correlation. If the soils are out of balance, then our bodies are out of balance. So we do lab analysis, just like if you go to the doctor and have blood work drawn. What we do is we find out what the soils are deficient in. And then based on those deficiencies, we're planting crop specific. We actually call them a cocktail mix. It's a mix of different seeds that are going to create the plants that are going to harvest the types of energy that we need to harvest from the sun. So it could be clover, alfalfa, buckwheat, rye, vetch, Sudan grass, up to 15 different varieties planted. And what's amazing is 2/3 of the acreage is committed to cover crops. It's an unprecedented amount.
Yes.
Because we're so committed to that. Even between the rows where we have in the past used chemicals to eradicate the weeds because the weeds compete for the light and the moisture and the space. And so you don't really want those weeds there. Then we started saying, well, gee, the chemical producer said, well, we can make this more efficient by using chemicals. So then we bioengineer the corn and the bioengineer the soybean. So when it's planted, it's sprayed and it kills the weeds, but it doesn't kill the bioengineered. So we become more efficient. And we produce food cheaper than any other country in the world. As it relates to our income, we produce food cheaper than any other country in the world, yet we have the highest health care. There's a real conundrum there.
You just said a mouthful right there about the whole system.
The whole system. So when you think about finding and acknowledging what mineral deficiencies are there, planting the types of plants that will harvest that energy, you're feeding the biology, you're creating biodiversity. The plants can pick that up. And we're seeing increases in anywhere from 150 to 300 times higher than the USDA average. It's amazing. Now, the USDA average is too low. It continues to go down. Nutritionists, when they're setting up a nutritional diet for somebody or a plan, most of the research that they're using to look this up is coming from USDA previous to 1945. And so they're using those numbers that were at the highest point in between 1930 and 1945. So it's really exciting to see that when we work in harmony with nature rather than trying to outsmart it, that it really, really works. It's so exciting.
It's like we have so much more in common with, say, butternut squash than we think. And you are essentially saying there's a lot of love that we can give each other, ourselves and the earth and the plants that we love and the vegetables, if we just learn to work with it better and learn to love it back. I think as we see climate change happening, as we see more of these climate events that are pretty scary and that are more extreme versions than what we're used to, this is a great reminder that we need to take on some practices. We need to take a second look and say, what can we do to go back to basics?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So with this too, let's think of this from a business perspective. Why are more farmers not doing regenerative farming?
We're all creatures of habit. And, you know, in a lot of cases, I think the average age of a farmer is something like 65 or 66 years old.
Right.
And in a lot of those cases, that's second or third generation. And so it's a difficult change unless you're forced to make the change. So when you're sitting on a second or third generation farm that was bought a long time ago, you can still make the numbers work. It's a very difficult challenge for somebody at 25 years old to go out and pay $10,000 to $20,000 an acre and make it work. If you were to ask farmers, they would prefer that there were no subsidies and it was all on an even playing ground. Because there's a lot of situations where you're limited by how much of the subsidy you can get based on the number of acres. If you're over an X amount of acres, then you're not eligible for that. And so there's really no subsidies for specialty crops because the volumes of each of those is such a low thing. You take everything on the average and look at the average, and there's such low numbers that we don't count.
Yeah. And you've really found your niche in that in a lot of ways too, which again, looking at things from a business perspective, you're saying, okay, we're the people to come to because that supply is so low otherwise. But like you said too, if only there were more incentives for farmers to change because it's hard and The cycle goes on and on and on until we learn to break the cycle somehow.
And I'm optimistic and hopeful that maybe we're going to start and see some of that. I don't know, but I'm hopeful that we'll start and put the focus on the things that are important. In Kiss the Ground, they predict 60 harvests left. Is there some fear mongering there? I hope so. I want to believe that we have more than 60 years, but if you look at the trajectory, look, you're younger than I am by a long shot. I'm old enough to know that 100 years is really a short blip in the big scheme of things. And when they say 60 harvests left, and you start and look at the trajectory of those diseases and the health issues that are occurring in the United States, we have to make some significant changes right now. Look, it's bad, but there's hope. It's not like doom and gloom and it's the end, but we have to make those changes. And it becomes up to the listeners. It really falls on all of us to make significant changes now.
Yeah.
You choose to support the right things by where you spend the dollars, and they really do make a difference. They make a difference at those farmers market. I could tell you they make a difference for us. We have a niche right now, but so far that works. One thing in life is for sure, things change, and we have to be ever evolving and changing and trying to keep up. How is AI going to affect us? How is it going to affect the production? And how can we utilize that in ways that can be meaningful and helpful for a small family farm? It's available to all of us. We just have to find ways to be smart enough to use it.
Yes. So off of that, you said three things that are so important that we connect, but are also fighting against each other right now. The average farmer right now in the US is about 65 years old. Now, in terms of food culture and how we're eating, there are more farmers markets than ever. They're very popular. And let's say my generation and beyond, we're all getting really excited about learning where does that food come from. And vegetables have gotten so much more delicious than I think my parents' generation. They didn't love a Brussels sprout because it was steamed and there was no flavor into it. I love a Brussels sprout.
Well, they overcooked the darn things to the point that they stunk like rotten cabbage. You don't have to cook this stuff until it's self prepared on the fork, right?
You don't have to torture yourself with food. You're supposed to love it. And the third point is that you said that we have about 60 harvests left. And I agree. I think that scientists and experts, we need to kick ourselves in the ass a little bit. We need to inspire a little fear in people to make a change. Now, with that, we're working on a limited timeline here. And on top of it, younger generations, they're not picking up farming the same way. So what is your hope that we can continue on here, that we can inspire folks to get involved, to be growing the way that you're growing so that we can all live healthier, happier, longer?
Well, and we're not sitting out here saying, look, our way is the only way, our way is the right way. We're trying to figure it out as we go too. This is a different territory. Ironically, when we started trying to figure out how to grow for the future, the way that we had farmed chemically never really felt right with my dad. And so when we lost the farm, as devastating as it was, at 19 to stand and watch them auction the entire farm off, including my mother's car and her house and all the land and all the equipment, it was an opportunity to kind of hit a reset. And we started looking back at agricultural books from 100 to 150 years old. Why is it, Sarah, that 100 years ago, without all the brilliance, without all the technology, without the AI, without the chemical companies, that the nutritional levels were 80% higher 100 years ago? So you start looking back. My dad had a saying that the only thing we're trying to do is get as good as the growers were 100 years ago. I am excited that we have 7 from the next generation involved on the farm, but if it was a situation where they were having to start out on their own, it would be a different deal. I have seen and heard of some partnering where there's a 65-year-old couple and they don't have anybody that's interested, and they take under their wing a 25-year-old that's interested in working with that farmer for the next 10 years, and that there's a chance for them to take that farm over at some point. But it also helps the farmer because they need somebody young to be able to come in and help do some of that more difficult work that occurs every single day. And they can learn from the farmer, and it's an opportunity for them to perhaps buy it and move on. And so I see some of that happening, some unique interesting arrangements like that. I think that farmers markets allow somebody, if they've got 2 acres of land, they can be involved in a farmer's market. It's a great place to be able to take your children there to teach them. It's an easy entry into the business on a small scale. And how do you eat an elephant? A bite at a time.
Yeah. If you've got a pot and some soil, you can grow food.
That's right. Right.
So let's talk about the other ventures that you've got under your belt. So you've got the farm itself. You have the beautiful farm market that you're in Huron, Ohio, and you're now shipping worldwide with the Chef's Garden boxes. Tell us about how that all came about.
Well, once again, and I know I used this word once before, but desperation. 100% of our business was direct to chefs around the country. COVID hit, and we were somewhat naive in thinking that in 3 to 4 weeks, this thing was going to blow away and it was going to be business as usual. Little did any of us know how long and devastating it would be. 100% of our business was chefs, but yet we heard of the fear of looking for clean food, and we heard of the fear of going in grocery stores because we didn't want to get too close and the infection. And there was such a demand in our community to open retail, but also we said, why can't we do this and make it available to people around the country? And so people could fall in. We pivoted to a nationwide home delivery and made the product available. Very first thing we did was send out about 300 boxes to chefs that were now at home with their families. So we sent the boxes out to like 300 chefs and said, look, you don't cook every single day of your life and then stop cooking. Here's a box of our vegetables. Please take them in hopes that your family can stay healthy. And by the way, we're launching a nationwide home delivery. We'd love for you to share on social media what you're doing with the food and put a link to this. And so it was really kind of an organic growth that people helped support us and really kept us afloat. And we made the decision not to furlough. You don't furlough a farm. We have 1,000 years of Chef's Garden experience on the farm. Some of our team members are second or third generation that have worked with us here, and they're part of our family. And we don't just say, well, sorry, things are tough right now. You're on your own. Now, we had 30 team members on the farm that felt like they would be better to take the furlough because of their situations. And we're like, God bless you. Do whatever you need to do. We're all in this to survive and get through it.
Yes.
But the rest of us, I think there was 126 that stayed on through it. And we did the farm to family. We did the farm market for the community. We opened the nationwide home delivery. There were a handful of chefs that were figuring out in their restaurants to do to go. Whatever we could do to try and keep things going. And that was really important. So it evolved again through desperation. Necessity is indeed the mother of invention.
It's almost hard to speak after that. Thinking about 5 years ago, we all felt the desperation and loneliness. And I think one of your superpowers in every single thing you do is being this master connector. You're able to connect with so many types, wherever they come from. I mean, you have folks working on the farm and with the farm from all over the world. And I think it's really special. And you're connecting with them through truly one of the things that we all have in common. So another one of your ventures as well on the farm is the Culinary Vegetable Institute. So that is your way of really connecting with chefs right there on site. Tell us a little bit more about that and the special chefs that you've been able to work with over the decades has just been incredible.
Yeah, it's just, it's been amazing. I believe that chefs took us under their wing early on. Folks like Jean-Louis Paladin, a lot of them were European at first because they were looking for the same quality that they were used to in Europe. Yeah, so we felt like it was really valuable to get the chefs on the farm to be able to learn from each other. And so my dad had an idea of building a place called the Culinary Vegetable Institute, where the most forward-thinking chefs in the world could come and do research and development, to do menu development, to do some R&R, rest and relaxation. We've had several chefs that have come and they said with all the disruptions in their normal world, it would have taken them 2 years to write a book. We had a fellow that came with his editor in 2 weeks' time in our library on the Culinary Vegetable Institute, focused attention. We're able to bang out the real guts of the book. Grant Achatz brought his opening team for millennia before they opened and did menu development. We got in the field and we looked at product, and he helped us learn what they were looking for and how they wanted it and the sizes they wanted it. And then Curtis Duffy was on that opening team. 7 years later, he brought his opening team. And so it's really, really been amazing. It's a symbiotic relationship of the chef and farmer working together. If the chef equals one and the farmer equals one, when they work together, it's a combined effort of times 10. And I think that that could be said for any people, any of us working together rather than working separately. It goes beyond that. We do dinners and different events that are open to the public. Our chef, Jamie Simpson, who's our chef liaison at the Culinary Vegetable Institute, he's been with us 11 years. And ironically, he mentored under Michelle Weaver, who mentored under Bob Wagner, that was a friend of mine, who instead of going to culinary school, he was an LA kid, went to France and went to knocking on the doors of the best restaurants in France. And basically they're like, this is this American kid. We're going to put him on peeling onions and carrots. And he did that for a year until they found out that he wasn't going away and that he was dead serious about it. And he learns the French language. Danielle Ballou told me one time that Bob Wagner speaks better French than the French. So it's awesome to have Chef Jamie Simpson on the farm. He can certainly connect with that younger generation. I like to think I can still connect with the younger generation, but he does a really great job at that. And he is a chef liaison between the farm and chefs out when he gets invited to do events in different places and when we bring chefs in.
Yeah, it's such a special place. I'm really excited to be able to come to an event there one day. Let's throw something together. Maybe we should do something for the Perfect Bite listeners at the Culinary Vegetable Institute. Once we grow, let's get that going.
I love that idea. Hey, Memorial Day, we're doing a live fire, and it's going to be an outdoor casual event. It's unlimited seating because sometimes you're going to be seated and sometimes you're not. But guy cooks literally under live fire vegetables and different pork and beef. Why don't you come and broadcast from there? There'll be a myriad of people and chefs to be able to talk to and interview that day. I mean, it would be amazing.
You guys heard it here first. Farmer Lee has invited me to come Memorial Day 2025, clearing the schedule. I didn't have anything planned, don't worry. So speaking of shows, you have your own TV show that's out now.
Well, the farm does. Again, I mean, I don't do anything individually. We're a team, we're a family, and I've been selected as the farm mascot, or I say that jokingly, but the spokesperson for the farm. We met Rachel Ray through COVID. Rachel Ray is one of the most generous, kind, giving human beings that I have ever met in my life. And she's been very, very successful. She's made a lot of money and she's willing to share it. And during COVID, she would call us and give us a list of addresses of up to 100 people and ask us to put those boxes together from our home delivery and ship them out around the country. And this became kind of a weekly thing for her. I mean, she was very supportive of us, but she was also trying to do what she could to help in her own way. And I wrote her a handwritten thank you note, thanking her. I had never met her before. I knew of her and I knew that we had shipped her product for her companies before, but never met her. And I wrote her a letter, and it really touched her that somebody took the time to write a handwritten letter. And the next thing you know, she said, we're doing live TV shows from afar. We're doing them from our home. And much like we have today, where I can see you and you can see me and the listeners, and we were doing Rachel Ray live shows. And we had a blast on them. And then Jamie would prepare a dish, and we would present those dishes, and it just became a really cool chemistry. We love Rachel Ray, and, you know, we think Rachel Ray loves us. She tells us that, and we believe her. And so she flew us over to Italy, and we filmed with her in Italy. And it's the first time we'd ever been to Italy. And so we got to go over, and we were in her home there, and she went to A&E, and she sold like, I don't know, I can't speak on her behalf, but I think like 20 shows. And one day when we were in Italy, then the second time that she brought us over, she said, I sold 20 shows to A&E, and by the way, one of them is yours. You need to come up with the name of it. And I'm like, okay, we're going to call it the Chef's Garden. And she's like, perfect. And so we actually filmed 10 shows in 11 days last summer, and it was intense. And of course, we would film almost 8 hours per day to get a 26-minute piece. So when you're dealing with a farmer, there's a lot of do-overs. But just like I said, when I went on Iron Chef as a judge, thank God for editing. We spent the morning in the fields with each chef. And then in the afternoon, we went back. And the idea was really based on the book, the Chef's Garden book. And Chef Jamie Simpson and Dario Torres and his team spent about 2 years during COVID assembling 100 recipes to go with the book. When people ask Jamie how long it took to do the book, he says, 2.5 years. When they ask me, I say 40 years of failures and hopefully a few successes along the way. But what Rachel really liked about the book was showing the diversity in a single vegetable. Look, a butternut squash. We saw Mom maybe cut it in half, put brown sugar, butter on it, bake it at 375 for 45 minutes, and we had them twice a year. Okay, we're done with a butternut squash for the year. We'll do them again next year. Where Jamie does a deep dive. And what we've learned from chefs is that at every single stage of a plant's life, it offers something unique to the plate. I picked zucchini squash as a kid forever. I never thought about the fact that the stems or the leaves could be edible. And looking at a Brussels sprout, I think the Brussels sprout is one of the most beautiful plants that was ever created. I don't know if you've ever seen one growing or your listeners have, but you have this stalk that grows 4.5, 5 feet tall. It could be almost as big around as your wrist. And then the Brussels sprouts just grow right off the edge of the stalk. And then it has these beautiful leaves that provide a canopy. And the canopy is, if you could imagine, if we were out in the sun and the weather 24 hours a day for as long as it takes to grow a Brussels sprout, which is 8 to 9 months, out in the fields with the weathering, we would look pretty rough. Well, this canopy provides shade for the Brussels sprout so it doesn't get sunburned. But we tend to pick the Brussels sprout off, and they've got all this love, all this energy, all this water, all of this that's gone into growing this beautiful plant, and we leave the leaves. I would defy you, for your listeners, I could blindfold you and serve you collard greens and serve you Brussels sprout leaves, and you could not tell the difference. Look, they're all in the cruciferous family, same family as the cabbage, and you cannot tell the difference in them. Why can't we eat the Brussels sprout leaf? I think from an animal standpoint, we get from nose to tail, and we do it because we don't want to waste that animal's life. If we're going to kill an animal to consume it for the consumption of us, for our survival, or our benefit, then we want to use and respect that animal to use all of it. Why can't we do that with a plant? There is some thought that that's a breathing, living thing too, and it is. So being more friendly to the environment can mean looking at that plant and how can we use it in its entirety. And so looking at the diversity of a single vegetable, and this was what Rachel liked about this. So each show, a chef picked a single ingredient. Were there other things that were involved in it? Yes, but you exploited the level of diversity within a single ingredient. And we tried to bring it down to a level that we could do it at home.
Oh, that is so special. I mean, you had Chef Curtis Duffy, some other folks that we should be watching. How do we watch the show?
Yeah, you can go to Homemade Nation, Hulu. There's some different ways to get it after it's been shown that are playing it. Hulu, Homemade Nation is the two spots where I found that are best.
Perfect. You're such a wonderful storyteller. Do you ever still get a little shy when you're on camera?
No, I mean, I can get nervous, but it's more because we were so desperate to survive as a family. There wasn't an opportunity to worry about it. We just had such an urgency. And I think that Danielle and Thomas Keller and Charlie Trotter, God rest his soul, and some of those chefs, when we would go to talk to them because we wanted to go to the best, they felt that passion and that sense of urgency. Of course, Thomas Keller has the plaques in his kitchen that says sense of urgency. There was such a sense of urgency. I'm the oldest in the family. I was in my first year at Ohio State. My dad called and said, you got to come home. We got to start over. And there was a level of pressure there to not let our family fail again. It was a hard time beyond what's really capable of being described. The outfit is based on a movie and a book, one of the few books, sadly, in high school that I read. But The Grapes of Wrath was one that captured me. And that would have been in like 1979. Little did I know, 3 years later, we would be experiencing our own Grapes of Wrath. And there's a scene on a Saturday night. If you guys ever get bored and you want to watch an old black and white, I can tell I'm getting old because I mentioned Henry Fonda. Henry Fonda's like 22 years old in this movie as the main character. But there's a scene on a Saturday night, despite their hardships, despite the fact that they're broke, despite the fact that they don't know where their next meal is coming from, despite all their hardships. Their overalls were worn and torn, but they were clean. And they had white shirts and they had bow ties on and they had a square dance.
Just like you.
And despite everything, they maintained their dignity and they persevered. And so I wear these overalls with pride, not boastful pride. Pride cometh before a fall. We believe that. But for everybody that ever dreamed of having a farm, for everybody that remembers going to a grandparent's or an aunt or an uncle farm, for anybody that ever lost a farm, I wear those to honor the small family farm. When we were kids, we were embarrassed because my parents would always have old vehicles. My dad always thought it was okay to invest in a piece of farm equipment or a new tractor, but cars were a bad investment. So we always drove an old junk car. So if we were late for school, we would have them drop us off the block before school because we'd walk in the rest of the way because we're embarrassed. And today, I'm perfectly fine with pulling into Ritz-Carlton Ballet in a pickup truck that's got mud on it from ear to ear and get out in a pair of overalls and a white shirt and a red bow tie. And I always jokingly talk with the guy that takes the vehicle and say, hey, now don't get my truck dirty. And we have a little fun over that. So I know that I can't put a three-piece suit on and look nearly as handsome as Danielle or any of the chefs. So I might as well go as the farmer that I am, and I'm okay with that. And when you get to a point in your life where you're okay in your own skin, it's a good point, and it's okay. We're going to be okay.
You have so much to be proud of. And it's not just the fact that you have built successful businesses and that you represent something that's so important to all of us. It's just your core as a person. So thank you for sharing that too. That's really special. Before we get into the world's best and hardest question, what piece of advice do you have for anyone who wants to get into the agricultural business or just be a future entrepreneur?
Well, there is another old joke that says, you know how you make $1 million in farming? You know how to make $1 million in farming?
You lose a lot.
You start with 5 million.
Yeah.
It's an easy way to lose a lot of money. I would encourage anybody that's interested in agriculture to do it. Don't worry about how much money you're going to make. If we were doing it for the money, we'd have quit a long, long time ago. Find a thing in your life that you're passionate about. I mean, truly, truly passionate about. And if you need to go to work for somebody that's doing it the best that you can to learn from and mentor from, don't worry about how much money you're going to make. I know chefs that you're familiar with the term of a stage, but I know chefs that worked a part-time job full-time so that they could support an apartment so that they could go work in a restaurant and do a stage and work 40 or 50 hours for free. Well, we know how much a culinary school is, and that can get expensive. Where you can go and learn. I'm not suggesting one is better than another. My point is, don't worry about how much money. We tend to focus so much around dollars today. At the end of the day, you can't take them with you. They don't mean as much as finding the thing that's your soulmate to your love and your passion. Find it. Find what really makes you want to spring out of bed in the morning and just go and read and learn and ask questions and just be tenacious beyond. Balance is also important too. I've seen chefs that have gone so far in that they can't keep the balance. That's critical. But find the passion. Find the thing that drives you, and don't worry about the money. Find the best people. Find the best things that you can learn from and mentor under them. The next thing you know, somebody doesn't show up, and you've been showing up and you're paying attention because your eyes are wide open and you're learning. And the next thing you know is like, can you do this? Yeah, I can do that. Put me on the line. It's those that persevere that will win in the end. And I really believe that it's about finding that passion, the thing that just makes you hungry, really hungry, and just don't hold back and go for it.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always such a good reminder to hear that. And Just a reminder to everyone listening to never start a business with the expectation you're somehow going to make a ton of money. Well, I'm certainly not going to ask you what your favorite vegetable is, because I know you're asked that and you're like, I don't have one. It changes every day. But with this podcast, it's called The Perfect Bite because for two reasons. One, it's a perfect bite in my career thus far, working with entrepreneurs, being a founder myself, as well as diving into the food world. But it's also because each of us has such unique taste buds and we all have our own perfect bite. Whether it is a certain vegetable that's ripe for the picking, or it's a bite from, the first fancy dinner you ever had. So I will ask you, Farmer Lee, what is your perfect bite?
Well, I always answer that by saying that it's whatever is in season today. Jamie has a theory. He hates to build the menu ahead of time because he wants to walk through the garden and see what's perfect today. And that's how menus should be built. I'm going to answer the question and I'm going to give you a vegetable even, but I'm just saying it doesn't matter the vegetable as much as it is it in season and was it prepared perfectly? I'm going to pick a turnip. This is an old heirloom variety of red turnip. It's winter season. They're a winter vegetable. In season, perfectly prepared. And today, it's the lowly turnip.
The beautiful turnip. And special in its own way. Eat that like an apple.
You can eat it like an apple. The red skin bleeds down in. Eat with your eyes. You want to eat the rainbow. Get as much color in your diet as possible. Now, I'm not talking about fake coloring, food dyes. I'm talking about eat the rainbow of colors within the carrots and all of the different colors of potatoes and beets and sweet potatoes, and get the greens into the diet. We've narrowed our selection down so much in the grocery stores based on which varieties produce the most ton per acre or which ones have the most disease resistance. We want that diversity. Diversity is important for the gut health. It's important for our immune systems. Eat the rainbow. That's a good turnip.
Farmer Lee, thank you again so much for your time, sharing your story, and sharing just this important information. Where can our listeners find you? From your venue to your social channels.
Farmer Lee Jones on Instagram. That's me. The Chef's Garden. The Culinary Vegetable Institute. chefs-garden.com on the website. Homemade Nation and Hulu for the show. We would love for you to take a picture of whatever you do seasonally at home and send us a picture over. We'd love to see it. Stay in touch with us. I'm grateful to be on. I'm grateful for the interest from your generation of food, the people that are growing it, how those people are being cared for, and how we're taking care of the environment. And it's really important for sustainability and regenerative agriculture.
Thank you so much. Everyone, thank you so much for listening in. And this was Farmer Lee Jones' Perfect Bite.
Thanks for tuning in to The Perfect Bite today. You can listen to future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Thanks in advance for subscribing, rating, and reviewing. You can follow The Perfect Bite on social media @PerfectBitePod. Now go get something good to eat.